Nightcap. Conversations on the arts and letters. With hosts Studs Terkel and Calvin Trillin. Tonight's guests are Stephen King, perhaps America's best-known writer of horror fiction, author of such classics as Carrie, The Shining, Dance Macabre, and Creepshow, in the movie version of which he makes his acting debut as well. Tom Savini, an acclaimed actor in theater and film, is also a special effects giant, responsible for the technically superb makeup in Friday the 13th, Dawn of the Dead, and Creepshow. George Romero, director of Dawn of the Dead and Creepshow, whose early film Night of the Living Dead has become a cult classic, paving the way for many of the horror movies of the last 2 decades.
She's slowly going crazy. Yeah. And she kills the landlord.
From Dracula to Frankenstein to Hitchcock's The Psycho to The Night of the Living Dead and The Shining, the subject of horror has always fascinated the public. How come? We were 3 masters of modern horror. Perhaps we can find out why.
Just to give us some idea of the horrifying things we're up against, we're going to show a clip of a film that all 3 of our guests collaborated on.
Extremely painful, Mr. Bell.
No, this is going to be an entirely new experience. You guys think that's scary, huh? Actually, I could tell it wasn't really scary because Studs and really scary things crawls under that chair right there. Is the horror, the scariness of horror, partly in the timing? I mean, is it partly when these things happen, as opposed to this clip where a lot of them happen one right after another?
Well, I think so. In the context of as a film on reels, or I think that the pacing and the timing is different between a film and a book. But I think that pacing and timing are very important elements, and you have to sort of time your shots.
Oh, it's situational. It's like it's an involuntary. A laugh and a scream. They're both like involuntary reflexes. They're involuntary reactions to.
You just must have called a shot. You must have known I was thinking. Telepathy. So here you go. The matter of laugh, you mentioned the laugh. I want to laugh. Now, is that wrong?
No.
Would you consider that an affront to your work, that I want to laugh when I see it?
No, it's sick, but it's not wrong. But then we're sick to do it. There was a story in the newspaper about 3 years ago that I still haven't completely lived down. I was at a World Fantasy Convention, and it was the buffet lunch, and it was pressed chicken or something that had obviously been flown in from the depths of some strange place. And some guy came up to me with a hangover from the AP and said, "What do you think about your fans?" And I said, "They're just like me, they're warped." And so it came out in the paper. King says his fans are warped, but you got to have a few warps in your record to dig it at all. I mean, we talked about the effects and stuff, and we, laugh. Look at Savini right now.
I get called. I'm demented. I'm sick.
Well, it's funny though, but when we start talking about something, Tom will come in and he'll be describing what he can make his monster do, and he'll say, "And then the monster is gonna do." And we're rolling on the floor laughing.
Yeah, but it's not because it's gory. It's because it's a magic trick that works. Like if I see something that's gory and I say, "Ah, beautiful," it's because technically,
when there's like a doctor, when a doctor has a horrendous case, it's very interesting. Oh, beautiful. Yet the person is suffering. In a way, not too unrelated.
Reporters do that. I would say that was a really good murder.
Yeah.
The
situation.
Juicy murder or something.
Yeah.
Do you remember Fibber McGee's closet? Man, you knew he was going to open that door and all that stuff was going to fall out. The knowing beforehand was what created the laugh. like in the crate, you know, when you know, by the time, you wouldn't think that anybody would care about the janitor, for instance, whether or not he was going to go under the stairs. We know that there's something in that box, and we know the box is under the stairs, but that makes it worse. It's just, I still don't know the difference in effect, why we laugh at one and scream at the other, but I know they're related because in a movie theater, people scream, and after the scream, then they...
Well, no, yeah, are you laughing because it's funny, or you laugh, sometimes it's a laugh, it's a release. Yeah. You're so scared, all you can do is laugh, it's hysterical, like The Mummy, when The Mummy first appeared in the movie, the guy's reaction is to laugh hysterically,
right,
you know?
I heard about that.
Or you
That was a scary scene.
Or you laugh at yourself. I mean, because half the time you sit in your chair and you're challenging the author or the filmmaker or whatever to scare you. And when it works, it makes you laugh. That's, you know, it's like going to an amusement park or into a laugh in the dark or something.
Is it more graphic today, more literal today than it was days before? More.
Yeah.
I think it is. I think in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's very hard to define whether it was just artists sort of, you know, bursting and trying to get more freedom, or whether it was just the liberalization of the various codes that controlled all the media. But there, in the late 60s, early 70s, we really started to explode with more explicit sex, more explicit language, more explicit violence, and everything else.
It all came into our houses anyway on TV. You know, we were watching guys blown away in Vietnam, and Savini didn't do any of those, what do you call it, blowing ahead in the movies.
Splatter effect?
Splatter effects, but you say that you blow a head or something like that. We had several heads that we blew.
That's a real good point. Remember, I think it was ABC was constantly showing a Nicaraguan soldier blowing away that photographer. You remember that?
Right.
They show that, and that stuck in my mind longer than anything I'd ever seen in any horror movie. That was because it was real, and it was...
Well, except they didn't show... I mean,
you in a place.
people now remember the war as having been shown on television, but they didn't actually show heads blowing up. I mean,
yes, they did. There was the picture of the general.
Oh, except that one general. Well, you didn't see that. You only saw him like that. You didn't see his head blow up.
Photographs in Newsweek.
That's Eddie Adams' famous television photograph. Saigon police chief shooting the suspected VC.
Yeah, there were some of those, sure. But part of the effect is that people actually know something in a horror movie. People actually know something horrible is going to happen. They know when the guy opens the closet.
It's why you're there. And it's safe. I mean, you know that you're going to be, or you hope that you're going to be afraid. Fans hope that they're going to be frightened. And that's partly why they go. It's why they ride a roller coaster or ride a laugh in the dark where things jump out of the corners at you. And that's why they're there. And it's also very safe. You know, I mean, we have the living room war, and we have other things that frighten us, the bomb and all this. You know, we're just walking down the street in some cities. We're partly trying to escape that.
It's interesting to me that I know that George is right when he said that the technology followed the impulse to get more graphic, and the impulse to get more graphic came during the Vietnam War, and it didn't have anything to do with horror movies. They were American historical pageants that created, in a way, that created the rating system to begin with, that made the movie industry say, wait a minute, if you're going to show these effects, we've got to stagger things. Bonnie and Clyde was a Depression epic, graphic bloodshed, but the real first graphic bloodshed that we saw as Americans in our movie theaters was from Sam Peckinpah, and they were in Westerns. The Wild Bunch was actually, I would say that and Bonnie and Clyde were more responsible for the rating system than, say, a picture like Dawn of the Dead. Not Dawn, Night of the Living Dead, which was released unrated.
Right. Because those were the first movies where instead of just a guy getting shot, we were all brought to think if a guy got shot, there was apparently a neat little hole, and it stayed in the body, right?
No hole, they went over. And they'd fall down. So it wasn't neat, it was clean, murder. That's not ugly, you know.
Death is not really death.
Yeah.
Do you...
it's not really death, I think, even when you show it graphically. In the context of a fantasy, I do think that people separate fantasy from... I think that the only sort of behavior-making stuff is not the fantasy stuff. It's more the one-on-one human violence.
So this is, in a way, you're answering those who say, look at the gratuitous violence, the effect it has on young people. You're saying people have the capacity to separate the fantasy from the real.
I think even children do. I remember fairy tales and things like that were really violent. But I got past it because I didn't expect a wolf to dress up like my grandmother, you know. But if it were...
Comes from a very good family.
But when it's human behavior and when it's closer to real life, like I don't know, but I would suspect that all the Trans Ams running around in the Dukes of Hazzard might be more behavior making than any of the horror fantasies.
So you don't expect in the same way that, say, Hinckley says he was affected by Taxi Driver, you don't expect a lot of people to pretend they're ghouls and eat up people from seeing your movie.
No, I mean, I don't think it's accessible to them as a form of behavior.
Right.
You have a guy like Elmer Wayne Henley, Chicago, the guy who killed the children.
Right. 30. Remember him?
Oh, Gacy.
Gacy.
I was going to say it barely made a wrinkle in Chicago. Studs hadn't even noticed it.
Far from horror movies in that atmosphere, he was a clown. I think for muscular dystrophy. There are photographs of him with Betty Ford and holding children and dressed up in his. He made them laugh during the day, and at night he took them into his house and killed them. So far as we know, he was not terribly affected by horror movies. The fellow in the Texas Tower was an Eagle Scout, loved his mother and the rest of it. We've gotten so far down this road that we actually believe that people treat fiction as though it were fact, and historically nobody ever has.
That guy in Texas might have been more affected by the Vietnam War than by horror films. Because that is officially okay. I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm not trying to make a political point, which I am trying to make.
Well, let's not talk about behavior, behavior, but just kind of scariness. I mean, or trauma, or whatever you want to call it. Well, you have kids, for instance. Would you take one of your kids, a movie star, of course, you take him anywhere. Mm-hmm. But how old are they, your kids?
They're 12, 10, and 6. No, 5, almost 6. And for instance, with Creepshow, I made the picture, I wrote the picture, I was in the picture, Joe was in the picture, my middle son.
10-year-old.
Yeah, in the clip, he's the kid who's poking the pin into the voodoo doll. As a parent, I evaluated the movie. I would evaluate any movie. And after I had evaluated it, I opened the door and said, come on, you want to go? Let's go. We'll talk about it. Naomi, my daughter, who's 12, declined because she doesn't like horror pictures. If it had been the filming version of a C.S. Lewis Narnia story or a Piers Anthony, she would have gone. So I took the boys. They had no problem. There was nothing that they wanted to discuss. They took it for what it is, which is a third-generation fairy tale by way of the 50s horror comic books. What gave my kids nightmares was Mommy Dearest, and I'm not saying that in a facetious way. There were literal screams in the night. I didn't know they were watching it, and I didn't know there was any reason why they shouldn't. And I went in one night, and they were treating that as an urban. Not as a fairy tale, but as an allegory. Their eyes were like saucers, and she's beating the little girl, I think, with a padded coat hanger or something. And my little boy is like...
Because they thought that could be true. Yeah. I mean,
it's much closer to...
now then, they see the horror
Shining,
as an attitudes of one person to another, parent to child, or attitudes of human beings to another. Whereas in the horror films, you have, with special effects, of course, but also something that has a surreal fairy tale effect.
Absolutely. I mean, they expect the monster to be bad, and they're not particularly upset when he is. And
whereas the real horror,
real stuff,
maybe an attitude of people to one another, which is something entirely that Mommy Dearest you talk about.
Yeah, but like in Friday the 13th, the monster is a lady, and I don't know as I'd want it to. Fluffy, we call him Fluffy. He's the crate monster.
Our main monster, one of the main monsters in Creepshow that Tom designed.
They just loved him. They thought he was cool, the same way that kids think that King Kong is cool.
You know, the big question comes up since we talk about the graphic aspect of horror these days. Isn't the ultimate horror left to the imagination? I suppose this was Hitchcock's approach. You've gone a step beyond that. Isn't horror all the more italicized if it's unstated?
Or is that suspense rather than horror?
It's different. I mean, there's a suspense that leads up to the shark. I mean, when the shark is swimming around under the water in Jaws, and we're seeing the scene photographed from the shark's perspective, we know something bad is going to happen. We're not quite sure what it is, and we're imagining what might it be. And Steve often says that a real horror fan wants to think that he really is in the hands of a madman who might do anything. And you're just waiting for something to happen. Your imagination generally exceeds what ultimately is shown as the payoff.
Well, then why have the heads blow and everything? I mean, why not? I mean,
because of that. In other words, each time I think it accelerates and it's hand in glove. Right. It's the perpetrator and the audience, and you know, moving further and further out, and it's the artist trying to achieve the expectations, and it's the audience wanting more and more.
You mean because he's seen one head blow?
I think stylistically,
or something like that he knows that's within the range of possibility.
Right.
I mean, that it could be really that bad.
Exactly.
That was Hitchcock's rationale for the shower room scene.
Right.
In Psycho, he was asked to justify it, and he said, I justify it the same way that some French director had justified the first scene of Hiroshima Mon Amour, where there are two people that are lying naked, and of course in America we wouldn't show that, although the shower room scene was shown in theaters, because Americans have no problem with blood or freight trains. It's love and flowers that we seem to have some problems with here. But he said, look, I show them that, and the knife never actually touches her, and the audience has this entire thing, and they say, oh my God, that scared the you know, just...
No, Cable, you can say anything you want.
On TV.
Get something out of you. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Get the crap out of you.
That's right. That stuff.
Well, and
So after that, everything else in the movie is fairly tame. It's just your imagination is so big.
Well, except he got away without showing anything, basically. What he showed was a little blood going down, right?
You know, that's like saying that some artist in some magazine airbrushed the nipples.
Right.
The nipples are there. He showed enough.
Now, horror films and horror books were never the smash hits they are today. There always was a public for them, but never as much as today. Isn't that so? Now, is there a reason for that?
I don't know. I know that in cycles they're very, very popular. I know that they were popular in the 30s and in the 50s. I suspect you're right, that they've never had quite the wide acceptance from a lot of different age groups that they have now, but I think that the reason is chiefly demographic. My wife says that the demographics of America now, that the baby boom, it's like, what's the animal that swallows its
Oh, that's right.
Python?
It's the rat through the snake theory.
Yeah, that there's this big bulge in the snake, which is a timeline.
Yeah.
And that us guys, me and Tom, I guess you're a little bit too old, but not by much. You're not technically a post-war kid.
You post-war, you're a boom
47.
baby. You and Tom are boom babies.
Yeah.
No,
the rat through the python thing is, I think you can actually show that's true.
No, I was just saying that basically right now we are the audience, and in terms of books in particular, it doesn't strike me as surprising that my books are doing well or that horror movies are doing well. I was even surprised to see a hard fantasy novel hit the bestseller list, the paperback bestseller list this week. And I think it's because right now, the people who have the buying power, let's say, are the people who were through the whole flipped-out drug generation. You know, there was a period in '68, I think, when I must have been on acid or mescaline, you know, about 12 weeks out of 20. And that isn't to say that you don't stop and pick up the briefcase or pick up your life, but some of that freak-out stays with you. And it's the horror movies, because a lot of the appeal of the horror movies doesn't have anything to do with gross or violent or, you know, any of that stuff. I think what it has to do with is fantasy and take your mind for a walk and your imagination.
Possibly boredom. No, I'm at this generation you're talking about. Your generation didn't know depression. Your generation is the post-World War II boom baby.
We're getting acquainted
came back
now.
The suburbs came in that.
We're getting
You just stick around. We'll let you know what it's like.
Yeah. But isn't it so? You had everything going for you. You were the market. You were everything. You were the different drug phase. But wasn't there also hey, what's next? I don't know. I'm asking you.
Well, for me, it's not boredom. It's just to get away from... You know, if you really think about it, this is a pretty ridiculous planet. You know, I mean, would you really like to go to another planet, you know, where fantasy, a more ideal situation than we happen to live in, you know? It's just, the world is this dumb planet. You know, go to a movie and see flying horses. And, you know.
I think we came off a real wave of hope,
Right.
and went into Cuba. You know,
Except your movies in general and all of this stuff, and even your books, are kind of grounded in some kind of reality, right? I mean, you don't start, I mean, in a way they're about normal everyday people that something unexplained happens to, right? As opposed to being about a different race or something, or Dracula, right? I mean,
I think that maybe that just makes it more accessible.
right.
It still is fantasy.
Right. Is the line we're talking about when we talk about whether or not, say, horror films have been popular, is that Dracula, those sorts? I mean, is that what you think of as your predecessors?
I think there have always been horror stories. I think another reason for the great success of it today, I mean, anything that is hugely successful today was never that big, because nothing was ever that big. I mean, we also have this incredible mechanism,
right,
which is turning things into, putting out 1,500 copies of a film on the same night and printing 4 million copies of a paperback, or so.
Dropping the other shoe, because for security, obviously you three have a certain point of view about the world. You have one, the crazy absurdity of it. You three have. Are you at any time when you write a horror book or do a horror film making a point? I don't mean political, doctrinaire sense, or social point.
I think sometimes, yeah. I on the surface of a film I made called Dawn of the Dead is a very, very kind of overt comic satire about consumerism and things like that.
This is the one in the shopping center.
In the shopping mall. Right. Yeah, the whole thing happens in a shopping mall.
Zombies in a shopping.
Right. Yeah.
These zombies. Well, that isn't the point. I don't know what it is.
Zombies are playing those games, but these are different kinds of zombies.
Well, the zombies in the shopping mall play the games too,
Yeah.
and they're eating perfume bottles. And one of the humans who's stuck in there says, "Why did they come back here?" And one of the other ones says, "Some atavistic impulse, I guess. This is a place where they were happy."
Right. Even if they're zombies, why don't we go to the mall? We'll hang out.
Oh yeah,
Right.
hang out.
That's it.
Instinct,
But all of it is allegorical in a sense, whether it wants to be or not.
Yeah.
It just even the cheapest horror producers in the world, there are these guys in Connecticut, two drive-in theater owners who said, "Look, let's make a couple of movies, and we'll make horror movies because they're cheap and they're quick and they always make money," which they almost always do, or did until the budgets went bananas.
Yeah.
Right.
So they made 2 horror movies, and in one of them they got together and they combined 2 things that they thought were hot and commercial. One was horror and the other one was beach parties. And they came up with a picture called The Horror of Party Beach, where these kids would boogie in their bikinis and then a monster would come out, and eat a few of them up. There was a slumber party, so you got to show the girls not only in bikinis, but in, what do you call them, baby dolls. But see, the thing was, the movie begins with a sequence that is actually frightening, when all these drums of radioactive waste are floating down to the bottom and hitting, and then later on you see them cracking open about 15 years later. Not because these guys wanted to do a big social comment on the dangers of radiation and nuclear waste, but because they had to have a MacGuffin make some kind of point. Grab this, because somewhere back here, they're scared. They're scared of that. So 15 years later, Jane Fonda comes along and makes China Syndrome, but these guys were there first, for $40,000.
Or maybe they just found some stock footage of the things hitting.
No, that whole wave of 50s movies had that, the radiation monster, and there was always something shaking, yeah.
Right.
You're talking about vocabulary. Casually, Stephen dropped the word. You had a MacGuffin. MacGuffin is a MacGuffin, a gimmick. What is a MacGuffin? A sort of a technique?
It's Hitchcock's word, I think.
Yes.
What is it?
It was supposed to be the thing. Hitchcock said, it's the thing the audience knows and the hero don't. And
it's what makes things move, right?
Yeah. It was
So
like
when the
dynamiting
audience-
one bottle of wine, and the guy would be, and you knew which one it was, and he starts to pick it up, and he says,
Don't.
and he puts it back and gets it on.
So that was the MacGuffin.
That's the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
But there is a vocabulary, isn't there? Do many of the young people who watch it, or film audiences, mostly young anyway, are they acquainted with the new kind of words? Are there new words in our vocabulary that come out as a result of these films?
There are a lot of new words that they use that I hear them use. Some of them I put in my books, and then they get banned from school. Right? So there's definitely a new vocabulary, but there always is.
I don't think there's a very big vocabulary that applies to the genre, though.
No, I don't. You don't hear that many different words.
Not too much.
I thought, because, thank you for being with us tonight.
Would you think that